Today I'm going to begin a new audio recording. I'm just bookmarking the beginning of it so I can see it on my page. I'll be right back to do the preface of the title work that I'm going to be reading from. So in answer to somebody's funny inquiry that, the only thing that I would be doing here on audio is starting another audio reading because I said that's all I'm going to do. Well, okay, you're correct. I thought maybe an obvious introduction would be okay with my listeners, but I guess that's not going to be happening to be true, that it's all right with my listeners to make obvious statements. However, since I don't know how to make some introductions, I'm still going to be making obvious statements. Thank you for your input. So now, a little bit less an obvious statement. I'm not going to explain how this happens because I'm not really sure either. Okay, except for the pop-up ads, which should be obvious by now. I drank as much water as I'm going to drink to make my voice sound a little bit clearer. I think it does. So this will be from Ranker, from the Graveyard Shaft, same group, two groups online that I was reading from the post just before this that I posted up yesterday, December 5th. Today's December 6th. And the name of the article is, Here's Your Best Bet for Surviving an Encounter with the Dreaded Wendigo. I keep calling them Wendigos, I'm sorry. Like they're some kind of special dingoes, and they're not at all any related necessarily or not necessarily to dingoes. I like African wild brush animals. Dingoes are mostly that, so. Okay, so I'll just read the introduction, then I have to take a break. To do some things, and then I'll probably be back. But how would you know? I guess maybe nobody knows the spirit in which. So this is also obvious. I don't know how to take it. I don't really have enough experience, so I don't have a break time, which makes it official. So I'd rather just state, I'm taking a break now, in case there are any glitches. I don't understand there are, but I would prefer to notice that, even though you don't notice that. It's just something that makes my life easier in doing this. Okay, so their intro. According to Native American folklore, Wendigo attacks are extremely difficult to survive. Yeah, these fearsome creatures hunt and kill humans, and they can even seize control over the spirit of their chosen victims. There are many variations of this legend, but the commonly held belief is that Wendigos, are savage, brutal cryptids that are both supernatural and malevolent. I agree. Therefore, when a Wendigo attacks, it typically results in the death of their prey. We've heard many accounts from the other article, that many accounts that everybody escaped, even though, the actual creature status of whoever was caught and possessed by the skinwalker. This is a Wendigo, though. It's not the same thing as a skinwalker in too many people's opinions. They escaped the skinwalker. We'll see what they have to say about the comparison. These beasts are usually spotted during the winter and were often blamed by early Native Americans for devastating famines. Interestingly, many legends also connect them to frigid temperatures in the north. When you combine all of this with their singular focus, savagery, and great hunting skills, it makes Wendigos seem like a possible inspiration for the White Walkers on Game of Thrones. I'm not a fan of Game of Thrones, so I've only seen them once and I don't remember, I'm sorry. In this instance, though, these winter monsters dwell in the U.S. and Canadian Great Lakes region and the Atlantic coast rather than north of the Wall. Whether you believe in this legend or not, it's always a good idea, at least, to know how to survive a Wendigo attack should you find yourself face-to-face with one. I think Wendigo legends, so much as even any other skinwalker legend comparatively or similarly, are global. You get folklore accounts and real-life folklore accounts or real-life accounts of their spotting. They're not as oftenly called Wendigos as skinwalkers. I still don't understand the exact difference, and I still have to get that article about the definition of different cryptids. There is one that I had in reference here. Oh, I think this might be it. Yeah. Okay, because I had, yep. This is the one that explains what they are. There are no accounts in this one. Oh, I wanted to find this one, and I just glanced at it. I'm sorry, I'm really kind of pressed for time on a personal level for a lot of things I got to get done. And I really don't want to quit this because that's what made me quit the other thing besides, my recurring flu issues. So, yeah, you're just going to have to bear with me, and if you're still listening, if not, then I'm just going to have to deal with it. Okay, so this is the first insert of, this is the one that I wanted to read that gives some definition of cryptids. I think I ran across some other articles, so I might pick those up and also read them. I prefer to read the accounts. They're much more entertaining and interesting, but this is pretty interesting. It sheds some light on things that we should know before we understand what we're thinking about, because it's probably not best just to think it's all entertainment. I would think it's that kind of entertainment if that's what it is. You should have some better involvement in the thriller nature of it, because, I mean, if you're thinking of what kind of entertainment that might be, you're talking about a real psycho, which the evil shamans are anyway, so you may as well try and understand where the folklore comes from. Okay, Wendigos are former cannibals, yep, and you could become one by eating human flesh. Imagine for a moment that you're lost in the woods in the dead of winter. There's no food, no way to successfully hunt, and your only companion is another human. In times of extreme hunger, people will often devolve to their most basic survival instincts and resort to eating another person. However, this happens because you're trying your best to hide and survive while stuck in a forest with a Wendigo. The joke may be on you. After all, the earliest Wendigo legends state that the spirits of Wendigos actually possess the bodies of people who resorted to cannibalism. Okay, survival is possible, but it'll probably drive you insane. Surviving a Wendigo attack isn't likely. That doesn't mean it's impossible, but you honestly may not want to survive after learning about the side effects. It may be a little more than just conjecture, since Wendigo attack survivors are practically impossible to find, but there are some who believe that just coming into contact with a Wendigo will drive you insane. This isn't a treatable type of insanity either, as your mind will become completely vacant of all thoughts due to exposure of such a powerful supernatural creature. You're basically in a state of a zombie possessive state. Yeah. So survival would mean, as I understand some of the folklore that I've read, survival would mean that you have to remain in the community of the shaman Wendigo and learn what just happened to you in order to continue to survive. But it's equitably a fictional state of existence after that. For all matters, you might not be aware of the fact that you've been murdered, but the insanity is what I'm saying. It would be living rigor mortis. There's something about the chemical issue with the attack itself that allows you to continue to seem like you're living and think through it, but it's essentially what they describe as a zombie state, from what I've read some about these attackers that are specifically the Wendigos, or heard, studying, trying to figure. And they remain with the shaman tribe that's hidden. I mean, there's just no proving what I'm saying. I'm just like totally crazy. Nowhere. I mean, in an underground cove and nowhere on Earth, some alien place, I guess. And that would have to remain in the cryptids, trying to get along with the new suffrage of a new cult leader, my understanding of, just the statements of what it would mean, because you're possessed of the shaman. How would you get free of that possession? I don't know, because you're a zombie. That's the question of all convulsing fictions that seem to have some paranormal reality to them like this. Very controversial. Okay, I'm going to finish this later. I'm taking a break. Wendigo. I'm practicing saying it. They corrected me how it said. Wendigo. Everybody heard me now. I corrected myself. Wendigo, nothing like that. If I fall back to my old praise is my false praise of the word, then you know that I meant to say Wendigo. Yeah, is that right? Yeah, okay. I've always been this way. That's why they never let me do anything, whoever they are. Because if somebody finds out about me, they'll know that I'm funny. Okay. I'll be back. Okay, so I'm just going to try and finish this article, and as short as this post will be, unless I find another thing that defines cryptid a little bit better. I mean, I know I could. Maybe I should do more homework. I don't mind. You people know how lazy I am. Okay, Wendigos. Okay, Wendigos. Okay, I can't do it. Are insatiable and will tear you apart. When most creatures hunt, they are typically satisfied after making one solid catch. After all, it makes sense to stop eating after feeling full, right? Don't you think? You're in the clear if you happen upon a Wendigo finishing up its meal, though, because these creatures are never full. Perhaps their insatiable hunger explains why they savagely rip their prey to pieces before even beginning to eat them. They must have some kind of chemical insanity in them, because there's like nothing that is that way. Nothing, especially if you're doing it from my point of view of shamanism. It has to be some kind of chemical thing that lasts for some grand duration, that's like in their chemical metabolism, like mad dog syndrome or something rabid that makes them just continue to tear and tear and tear until they're like dead from trying to not be alive. I don't know, I think it's like kill and kill and kill and then not kill maybe. So it's like one word followed by no words, plus 10 followed by a 0, something that is all positive followed by something that is all negative, because then how else, everything would be a Wendigo attack. So they have to stop sometime. It's just like saying you can't disintegrate a zombie. I don't get it. So all those movies where you can't disintegrate zombies, there's like, you can tear apart anything that's material, but not a zombie is unterrible. There's no disintegration point for what is, that doesn't make sense. Burn the Wendigo alive to survive. According to some legends, fire might just be your best weapon when it comes to battling a Wendigo. Unfortunately, you can't simply wave a torch near a Wendigo's face and call it good. Instead, it's necessary to somehow set their entire body on fire. Of course, getting that close to a Wendigo is so dangerous that most people won't even be able to test this theory before being devoured. It does make sense, though, that a creature with an ice heart would be so vulnerable to fire. So what I'm thinking there's like this alien shaman, and he is like empowered by his drugs, his incantations, his armies of other evil spirits, his evil spirit folklore, his other demonology, and he's going out against a fold of the living for whatever reason. He holds a thing against them, a license against them, false of course, but stated that he will tear them. Well, I think that's a statement. So rather than, anything else to happen, he takes upon the old occult manner of bestial destruction of humanity. And to do that, the proof of the latter age, since there was a time when the bestial destruction was the only thing that these shamans would do. So that would be a contemporary modern age after that, which has been like forever now, would be to have to possess the human spirit in the form of the beast and carry it themselves. So this alone would make him such an enormous predator that he'd be part of an elemental race. He's an alien to begin with. He's a false spiritualist to begin with, so he's got lots of magical things happening for himself in energy zones, chemical zones, whatever. And he's on fire with the delusions of his attacks. They're delusions to us, not to him, so they're effective, and then there's the proof. So he has a human spirit on fire of its horrors, and he has all the bestial spirits at his disponibility, so now he's become the embodiment of it all. Yeah, that's a very evil spirit that somehow is an alien that would be a material alien at some point. I'm saying their ultimate power, if I'm correct, isn't eternal, isn't perfect. Once they're done with their ceremonial, it would just be like an alien just sitting there. Have you seen like those on-camera sightings of aliens? I think that's the same kind of shamanistic kind of possession we're talking about. So what are they doing? They're winding down from their murderers. They're just sitting there like a lump of clay without anything to do. It's like very evil people, if you could see it that way, but very evil aliens, whatever. Okay, I tried. Okay, the next one. Always go after the Wendigo's frozen heart. The primary weakness of a Wendigo is its frozen heart. There are many legends that talk about this, though the most common one states that destroying its ice-cold heart will release but also kill the human trapped within the beast. To pull this off, you'll need to get enough to the Wendigo to stab it with a silver stake. Oh, he's like a vampire. It's also possible that a silver bullet will do the trick, and some even believe that fire can melt a frozen heart. Watch out for ice storms and tornadoes while the Wendigo is pursuing you. I would guess. A Wendigo is difficult enough to deal with due to its savage strength and superior hearing abilities. These cryptids can also command ice storms and tornadoes. You see what I'm saying? He's a shaman in there, which may make it seem virtually impossible to safely make an escape. When you combine this with their apparent ability to cause animals to stampede and to rip trees out of the ground, it becomes even harder to imagine surviving a Wendigo attack. Therefore, if a Wendigo is after you, it's important to remain alert for much more than just their presence. After all, a tornado or an ice storm could kill you well before the Wendigo ever reaches you. If you're able to destroy the Wendigo's heart, you must complete a ritual. I just heard a banshee scream. I lived a lifetime. That's bad luck for me for the next 10 years. That was a dog barking. Thank God. Against all odds, I have heard several banshee scream, and it was always pursued by some form of bad luck, and I don't want to hear a banshee scream. Against all odds, you've managed to stab a Wendigo's heart with a silver stake or blade. The creature appears to be dead, so you're all set, right? If the legends are true, you must go one step further to ensure that the Wendigo won't come after you again. First, you have to take the shattered Wendigo heart and lock it inside a silver box. Next, bury this box in a graveyard that's attached to a church. It's not going to be easy. Before you head to the graveyard, use an axe with silver plating to chop off all the Wendigo's limbs and head. Finally, salt the body, burn it until it's ash, and let the wind scatter the remains. Okay, so in other words, you have no hope if a Wendigo attacks you. Look out for people suffering from Wendigo psychosis. As if actual Wendigos weren't bad enough, there's also a psychological condition called Wendigo psychosis. People suffering from this mental health disorder actually believe that the spirit of a Wendigo has possessed them. The primary symptom of Wendigo psychosis is an intense craving for human flesh. They become cannibalistic. This is generally brought on by living in an isolated location without easy access to food. There are several belonging to a necromonger's cult. Necromongers demand cannibal sacrifices to be achieved and dispensed and then rehumanized, as I remember. There are several historical accounts of Wendigo psychosis. One of the most notable is the sad case of Swift Runner, who slaughtered and ate his family in 1878. The following year, he was executed despite evidence that he was under the influence of Wendigo psychosis at the time of the murders. Wow. I just have 2 more sections to read, and then this is done. A Wendigo can mimic the sound of human voices. Yep. That's what everybody says, and this is terrifying. This is the key, so you don't laugh at me too much. This is the key of what makes me understand that they're possessive shamans on an alien level, but that they are. One of the Wendigo's most impressive hunting skills is also arguably its most dangerous. If you were alone in the woods or knew that a terrifying monster was hunting you, it's likely that you'd be looking for assistance anywhere and everywhere. You may also find yourself searching for a loved one without knowing that the Wendigo has killed him already. In either case, hearing the voice of someone you know may tempt you to reveal your location. Sadly, the Wendigo can mimic human voices, which means it's impossible to know for sure if what you're hearing is a real person or a tricky Wendigo. Yeah. This is some kind of a snake origin in alien folklore. The origin of a human that started out as a snake and not as a primate. A lizard primate. What do they call them? A reptile, right. Because reptiles, in a folklore of evolution which involved upright reptilian evolution, which I will confess at this point I do believe in, so you don't find this out later. It's all about Star Trek episode at this point, so it's not really worth talking about. But it has never really been discredited. It's just the primate evolution, even though it doesn't really have that much authority in it. I mean, it doesn't have its perfect proof. It's under preferential terms right now. The reptilian evolutionary story, at least in alien folklore, has a lot more grounding than any kind of primate Bactrian evolution is not the same thing as reptilian evolution. And the reptilian folklore, anyway, to get to the point finally, is the statement that while they were evolving and no one knows the ending of the story, because there was the great, it wasn't just a big bang concerning the Earth. There were like multiple bangs throughout the universe at some time that destroyed any access to understanding what might have happened. But necessarily, it doesn't necessarily end the fact that it could have been. They just terminated proliferating the option that there were aliens once involved in some evolutionary course. Anyway, so they were able to mimic. For some reason, there were other humanoids already around. They were making noise. Either that or they were doing it of their own free will. They were making similar guttural sounds to formed human words, even though none of it made sense. Then they claimed that there was like lyrical folklore from other times of mythological creatures, like dragon creatures, interlacing with the evolution of these like uprights, like my favorite example of the iguanodon, upright walking reptiles. And the dragon folklore was intercessory, and they were saying that the dragons could speak because they were mythological. So they were learning to imitate dragons at their speech, who had known other human aliens. So in this mad legendary drive to restore humanity from an alien fall, they were restoring a reptilian evolutionary path that then was completely cut off. But I've read that several times. I love dragon folklore, so I tried to pursue it to see how far you could find it. It ends about at the Ice Age. You can't see it anymore. All right, well, anyway. Going indoors won't stop the Wendigo. Oh, this is sad. Yes, if you watch YouTube videos of collected aliens, what I'm saying, these collective aliens that you see indoors, the Wendigo could follow indoors, but they're indoors. They try to come indoors. The green aliens that could be reptiles of some kind, that are like the murdering kind, and the ones that bring harbingers of death from evil spirits. Maybe not all aliens are like that, but these, they always record them, and they're loving to live indoors. They want to cohabitate hidden in a coven of other living people indoors and maybe mimic them, become a part of them. I don't know where that ends too. This was also like Harry and the Hendersons, the Bigfooted ones, become human. So I don't know where, it all draws out. Like I say, I've never had that much time to look into it, but a little bit I keep it out on the periphery. And so, no, this kind of shaman that I would be pointing at as an alien loves to be indoors with other humans, in his own coven, like separated in his own place, like in a closet or in a basement or in a separate area, like a woodshed or something that's connected, because he likes the companionship. And he does nothing, then he goes back out, does whatever, and then just sits there like a bunch of logs, So if he did become separated into, how could you continue to survive that way? He's definitely not human. So if then he went back out into the wild and became this creature, this is the compulsion of the fulfillment of everything that I'm saying could be the whole case factor, start to finish, So he'd be coming back inside to find everybody else. They're always trying to make some kind of altered universe community with the living, the people who have been established as, this is like ordinary existence. They want to make something else of them. That's the intensive drive of destroying the present spirit and destroying it into their evil way. It's really sad. Okay. Don't let the concept of a locked door lull you into a false sense of security. Wendigos are extremely intelligent cryptids that also have fantastic manual dexterity. As a result, they have the ability to easily open doors. Even worse, they understand how to unlock doors. Although running into a house may buy you a few seconds, it's not likely to end the Wendigo attack. Oh, wait. No, there's more to this article. I have more to this article. Remember that Wendigos can hunt for several hours without tiring. Some creatures will tire or eventually become bored of chasing after their prey. Unfortunately, this isn't the case for Wendigos. If one is tracking you, it's wise to assume that it will continue to do so until it catches you or until it miraculously manages to kill, or until you miraculously manage to kill it. These articles always instore so much faith to the possibility for the human imagination to enter into a fictional ultraverse of its own, choose its own self-identity with what it's known so far, and destroy a false fiction, which isn't so much a false fiction. Evil shamans of evil spirits is not a fiction throughout the universe. So it would be hard to do it on that level. If it was all fictional, though, it should be a game on at some point of fairness, but okay. These fierce hunters become obsessively focused after selecting their target. Therefore, humans will usually tire out or make a mistake long before the Wendigo ever considers giving up. Okay, yeah, but there's nothing we can do about them. Once they've called your phone number, it's over with. Staying perfectly still is the best way to survive. I would guess in a confrontation, the only thing you could say is that you were destroyed into a zombie state of mind to find out what the next Ultraverse is about by a very extremely destructive alien kind of beast. I mean, you have to bring it down to some kind of human level at one time. If it's so fatalistic, we're always given hope to try and... What are we supposed to do? Hope there's an arena someplace like the gaming lets you go out and fight a Wendigo, A game would allow you to do that. Wendigos have amazing hearing, but this may be in part due to the weakness of their eyesight. So if you're able to remain perfectly still, it's possible to evade them. Of course, there are some who believe... There are some who believe that the Wendigo's eyesight flaw becomes irrelevant if you make the mistake of looking them in the eyes. If you ever find yourself face to face with one of these monstrous creatures, there are a few important things to remember. Don't make a noise, don't make a move, and whatever you do, don't make eye contact. I would guess that probably wouldn't end it. You're still talking about a cryptid that has a plan to destroy human flesh. So I would guess it's like any kind of mythological encounter with an evil spirit, you're pretty much doomed. It's a doom sentence at this time. Human beings have never been given any opportunity. You have to have an opportunity of your own to stand on your own and make preparations and fight them. But like I say, they're aliens. To my understanding, my self-knowledge is complete on the question, so that's how I say I know they're aliens. I won't consider anything else. I'm going to say I know they're aliens. And somebody will disagree, so there it goes. And I know it's not true, maybe, who knows. So what I'm saying is, let's move over to the bad Star Trek example that I'm going to use forever. I used to be a Star Trek fan, and I'm seriously not anymore because they have sucked the life out of every kind of fiction that there is, and there has been fiction besides them. They used every kind of ancient folklore ever, and they adopted it for themselves, and now there's absolutely no talking about anything because it all turns out to be them. So I'm hugely not a huge Star Trek fan. There's no discussing possibilities, without ending up in a bad Star Trek episode all the time. So that's where you're going to end up with me all the time. But shapeshifters on a human alien level, humanistic aliens, and what I mean by that is that they seem to adopt a human form, as opposed to just seeming like, what would be alien, though they're humanoid. Okay, by the sight of them, just by looking at them, I'm saying. They don't have any other bestial attribute, at that point. So they've been changed into something that looks more unevolved as perhaps, like I'm saying, a reptilian kind of alien cryptid. I believe in the alien folklore of, they state that reptiles evolved at some point into human aliens. That's what I'm saying. Whereas the cryptid aliens still retain the more prehistoric form. So they would be like an ape to a developed person, but they're reptilian. They're not apes. They're not Bactrian. Bactrian are half apes, half humans, unevolved. I know that's folklore, but I don't know how else to discuss it. The Bactrian wars were in the southeast basin of Babylon at one time, between India and Babylon and the rest of the Mideast going west. And it was the most foul war ever. It started. It was a precursor of everything that was like the idolized folklore of beastmen, destroying people like these creatures do. And they were half men, half apes. They started out as gorillas, and they somehow evolved. It became a genetic curse to them for taking on just human beings, large gorilla warrior, kind of almost aliens themselves, humanistic aliens themselves from that. Yeah, and then they had taken on so much, I guess, chemical infusion into their DNA to make themselves stronger and more horrible to face, like Goliath. They were all like Goliath. So they became half men, half apes, according to the story. And the story is never reconciled. After that, there was a death of creatures that were humans, and then it's not really known that that was ever true. And then there were apes again. But not all of historic record coincides with that. Human bones have been found when they claim that there have not been human bones and they weren't ape bones, and then vice versa. So it depends on exactly what and where you're talking about. I don't think there's any definitive authority. But Bactrians are what I call like the human ape form. In comparison of the idea that I'm trying to introduce, that there might be aliens, there might be aliens that have no precursory to being interesting. I mean, they just might not be interesting to other humans that aren't aliens. I don't know how. I mean, where would you draw the line at that point between snakes and not snakes? I don't know. Anyway, but what I'm trying to say, so getting back to the snake folklore, the snake evolutionary, the reptile evolutionary folklore. So these creatures become human, and they still, many of them, and in a form of advanced evolution, become shapeshifters, like they have in bad Star Trek episodes. And they go to war. They're shamans. They go to war with other shapeshifters. It's kind of also like that, my favorite movie, I forget that. It's a replicant story. So replicants versus replicants. But a replicant, as you know in that movie, is a snake. Mm-hmm. That has been humanized, but they're taking, of course, it's more of a Wendigo story. They're taking composite forms of persons and redesigning them. It's really a very evil movie out on a robotics line. That's my interpretation of what's going on. And they're literally putting them in the sequel. They're putting them into dromedary cages, into lifestyle cages. I mean, they're locking them up into mental cages somehow. From artificial intelligence technologies, and making them live under the order of the people who were running the robotic murder rings in the first place. Very Rockwellian. I complain about this sometimes, but well, I'm going to leave that out of this my YouTube channel. I'm just saying. So it has a lot of similarity to a lot of other folklores that you see, but the point that I'm trying to make about the other kind of skinwalkers is that they're humanistic, like you see in Star Trek. So they would just be self-accepting that they're hidden. And this is probably the corrupt form of evil which begins everything in terms of the fictional political infamy of the war between shamans. I'm just trying to put it out there that it's not as shallowly unnatural or natural, however you want to see it, as circumstance seems. And from a fictional point of view of an explanation, there's a lot of historic folklore behind it, and it's alien. It's mostly alien. And if you're not including snake people and their evolutionary folklore, you're never going to get the point of what happens here. Okay, so I think this is finished. What am I going to do next? So that's like one idea of an explanation of a cryptid. An urban legend that I'm actually going to review this. Many people believe Walking Sam is a shadow demon who convinces teens to commit suicide. Wow. That may be another day. I'm trying to focus on shapeshifters, shadow people. Oh, here it is. Here's the other one that I was going to read. You've no doubt seen or heard of the shadow people, but what are they? This is an article discussing them. Let me just start it. I might check. It's been a half hour. I wanted to upload this, but I think I might take some more time and then try and finish this one and put them all together. Let me start the intro here. Shadow people have been scaring people for thousands of years, but what are they? Some people believe these humanoid figures are a supernatural spirit or entity that manifests as a dark shadow. The history of shadow people dates back as early as the 600s Common Era. Creepy shadow people stories come from all parts of the world and are eerily similar. The Quran makes mention of pitch-black sapient beings created from fire that were not purely spiritual or physical in nature. Heidi Hollis, I don't know who that is, more recently described shadow people in her book, The Secret War, she's an author, as dark silhouettes with human shapes and profiles that flicker in and out of peripheral vision. But their emergence in popular culture can be attributed to some paranormal investigations who've dedicated their life to researching and finding these shadow people. I think the shadow people folklore is probably extremely also key to the corrupt agency of evil shamanism and what would then turn out to be the same result of, the pursuit of an evil spiritualist. I'm never going to quit prefacing everybody with the word evil, after the living, for whatever reason they hold. But what are shadow people and where did they come from? Read these creepy stories and see if you can discern for yourself. Other actual stories, I thought they were examples. See, I don't do any homework. Okay, so the first story was going to be, I have to unpop an ad. They look like huge, ominous black shadows in the shape of a human. I think I'll just read it then. The most common form of a shadow person presents themselves is the classic shadow being, which is described as dark, inorganic, phantom-like bipedal figures that look just like a dark black shadow of a figure, but don't seem to quite have full human form or facial or bodily delineation. They feel very masculine and oppressive and like something that is beyond human and out of our scope of understanding. Natalia Kuna, the psychic medium. I also don't know any of the people. I'm like the most popular media ignorant person that ever has been. In the course of my lifetime, I used to know almost everything that was in popular media, and now that's about nothing. Describes the figures as tall but 7 feet in height, though they can figure and transform into different sizes and shapes. Often their limbs, arms and legs, seem quite long, and very occasionally fingers seen. Some believe their dark form is used as camouflage, and they take on a rough humanoid form to blend in with us. Others report seeing shadow people with red or green glowing eyes, or even wearing a hat like the Hat Man, who often appears in a cape or trench coat and a hat, which can range from a top hat to a fedora or cowboy hat. It's almost wholesome when you look at them like paintings on a wall. I always get that feeling. And then, of course, if you get even like the most peripheral interface, you just come into connection with their evil, dark, corrupt powers. You want to regret what you were thinking. Okay, I'm going to break, and I will continue this article another day and then post this entire fiasco. Thank you. I'm back again. It isn't quite a day. It's probably a day. I don't keep time when we're apart or when we're together. Okay. I don't need to get as strange as I actually am on this audio, so I'm not going to. I'm going to just jump right into the next article. Some people believe that shadow people are extraterrestrials. We'll find out. Author and self-proclaimed shadow people expert Heidi Hollis mentions that shadow people are alien beings in her book, The Secret War. More specifically, she believes the man in the hat to be an extraterrestrial. Some believe the figure's hat could be a form of disguise to cover up an unusually shaped head that could be an alien in appearance, or it is some kind of otherworldly technology or even protection device. Theorists believe the man in the hat may belong to an alien species known as the Greys. I'd agree with that, the Greys. These types of aliens are what most people associate with extraterrestrials. Next section. Others believe they're interdimensional beings. Natalia Kuna, a psychic medium, describes shadow people as conscious, intelligent, interdimensional beings. She writes that they're able to dematerialize very quickly and shapeshift into other forms, such as in the figure of a cat, dog, rodent, oddly shaped spider, insect, or other creature or shape. On Kuna's website, she says the man in the hat is an intelligent consciousness from another dimension or time-space reality, possibly the future. She's not the only one to think this. Author Michael Kinsella wrote in his book, Legend Tripping Online, Supernatural Folklore and the Search for Ung's Hat, that shadow people are extra-dimensional inhabitants of another universe, of an alterverse, Next section. Ancient cultures believed in shadow people. The mythology of shadow people dates back to early 600 BCE, ancient Common Era. Ancient Egyptians believed in shadow people and called them the Kelbut. Romans believed these people came from the underworld. Greeks thought shadow people were literal shadows themselves, which they often gave up to Zeus as a gift. They gave themselves up and sacrificed to Zeus to sacrifice the dark spirits within them. All of these cultures, though, had a common belief. These shadow people were both part of the real world and the metaphysical one. They crossed through universes into an alterverse. Everybody agrees on that almost. In ancient Egypt, in particular, shadow people often went and did the bidding in the spirit world for humans who couldn't reach it, sometimes for good and sometimes for evil. Dr. Shelley Adler wrote a book that could connect seeing shadow people to having sleep paralysis. In her book, Sleep Paralysis, Nightmares, Nocebos, and the Mind-Body Connection, people who suffer from sleep paralysis may perceive a shadowy or indistinct shape approaching them or standing over them during an episode, meaning these visions might not be supernatural, but just a perception inside your brain. Others, like neuroscientists Balan Jalal and V.S. Ramachandran, believe these hallucinations may have neurological explanations as well. Next section. People recall spooky encounters with shadow people while they sleep. Here's a personal account of an encounter with a shadow person from the title work, The Lineup. While lying there unable to sleep, I became aware of a presence, and suddenly and silently a figure moved through our bedroom door and proceeded to our bed. Then, rounding the corner of our bed, took up a fixed position at the foot of our bed. I was aware that this entity was conscious of us and was intently watching us as we lay there. The entity can best be described as something that had the appearance of black smoke or shadow. However, it was more material than either of these, but less material than a real person. The most odd thing about this is my lack of fear. Although I was acutely aware of this being and the fact it was not of this earth as we perceive it, it did not seem to arouse any fear response in me. I would say it aroused a feeling that would fit somewhere between creepy, odd, and curiosity, especially considering the fact that it was aware of me as I was aware of it. After some time, I almost convinced myself that I was imagining it, but then I became aware of the fact that my wife was no longer breathing like she was asleep, but she was breathing almost silently. I then said, "Honey, are you awake?" To which she answered, "Yes." Then I said, "Do you see anything?" expecting her reply to be, "What do you mean?" But much to my surprise, she said, "You mean that thing standing at the foot of the bed?" At this time, I did become somewhat nervous. We lay there for about 10 minutes, and then it was gone. It just over a period of about 10 seconds became less solid, and our perception of its presence became weaker until it just wasn't there anymore. Then it was as if it had never been there. Nothing like this has happened since, and the only evidence it ever existed in my wife's and my memories of it. Next section. Shadow people do sometimes attack. In 2003, radio DJ and shadow person expert George Norrie invited Heidi Hollis and Matt Moneymaker, a noted Bigfoot hunter, onto his radio show Coast to Coast to discuss shadow people and the Hat Man. Norrie told Hollis and Moneymaker he heard reports of shadow people attempting to jump on their chest and choke people. This would suggest shadow people actually have the ability to make contact with the physical realm. Lena Townsend, a registered metaphysical practitioner, said, while she's no expert with shadow people, she studied instances where people said they felt antagonized by suspected shadow people. In such cases, she believes these shadow people are more than just your average spirits. They could possibly have demons attached to them. But she said she doesn't think all shadow people are malevolent or harmful. Next section. Some believe they're pure evil, while others believe they're neutral guardians. Kuna claims, that most shadow figures are parasitic, malevolent, or evil, although on rare occurrences people claim to have encountered shadow people with neutral auras. Some describe shadow people as benevolent and guardian-like. However, shadow people with red or green glowing eyes are believed to be extremely evil humans who have passed and transformed into this dark, ominous form in order to continue their evil, malevolent ways. They are dark force discarnate entities. Townsend herself said the same thing. Not all shadow people are evil, but the ones that are definitely are. So if it's an evil shadow person, then it has no other quality but evil. She said, this is because shadow people feed off the energy they're given. So if their spirits are stuck because of a negative experience, they can become evil, while others living in a positive environment won't feel motivated to lash out. I'm talking about the shadow people in every case of the energies that they're absorbing around them. So if there's an evil circumstance, the shadow person would be evil, whereas if it's a benevolent circumstance and there are shadow people, they would just migrate to, neutral. Next section. They can be repelled by invoking the name of Jesus. Hollis told Nuri on an episode of Coast to Coast AM in 2006 that shadow people can be repelled by various means, including invoking the name of Jesus. I apologize for my phone going off. I forgot. I'm paranoid about turning it off. Kuna agrees on her website. Just saying Jesus' name can be enough. They are instantly repelled and banished. The light is too strong. Kuna also provides a number of alternative methods to banish shadow people, such as say protective prayers. A super powerful one is the Archangel Michael prayer of protection. Be very vocal, yell out to them, demand they leave, laugh out loud at it, put on some loud music, use sage, fully sage the area, yourself, all family members in the home, perform a banishing ritual. Next section. The Nightmare is a documentary about sleep paralysis that features reenactments of encounters with shadow people. In 2015, director Rodney Asher premiered his sleep paralysis documentary, The Nightmare, at the Sundance Film Festival. It features 8 people who suffer from sleep paralysis and recreates their experiences with professional actors. Many of the encounters involved the Shadow Man, who is played by Steve Yvette. Shadow people have been a hot topic in popular culture for years, dating back to an episode of The Twilight Zone in 1985 called The Shadow Man, where a teenage boy discovers the man in the hat is living under his bed and learns that while shadow people can kill humans, they do not harm those whose beds they live under. I remember that. That was a really excellent episode, but I liked The Twilight Zone, all the Twilight Zone. In 2007, David Wong released a novel called John Dies at the End, where shadow people had the power to erase humans from existence. Years later, it was developed as an indie film. In 2013, the horror movie The Shadow People was released. Not The Shadow People, just Shadow People. The film was based on true events and followed a sleep study conducted in the 1970s where patients were visited by shadow people in their sleep. Okay, so that's the end of that article. I'm not sharing any of my thoughts with shadow people. I'm still stuck on the Wendigo, and I wanted to cover shadow people, and this is really sad. Do you mind if I take some more time of yours? That I didn't do my homework. I'm never going to do my homework, so you're always going to get stuck with me being really sad. Here, I'm going to search this. Are shadow people that I don't know this and I haven't looked it up considered cryptids? I think we already found out that they're not. Yeah, okay. Here's your answer. Yes, shadow people are often considered a type of cryptid. Okay, that was my feeling, and then I thought that we read something that said that they're not technically formal cryptids, because if you listen to my explanation for how the cryptid is, it's a shamanistic universe, so it's a spiritual war to begin with that falls into a metaphysical realm and then becomes physical by the attachment to anything that's creative, that's biological, to animals, to people who report it, but I know these things happen to animals as well. I wish I could say I knew of instances that it attacks, natural natural things that are biological. But it's basically an attack on creative biology, I think, on metabolic biology more than, I don't know if they probably would attack chemical biology, but if they did, that would be kind of strange, because how else are they traveling through space and time? Cryptids travel through space and time. Shamans practice in chemical transformations. Whether that's easy to believe or not, shamanism is about chemical transformations, whether they're coded or uncoded, whatever. I'm not going to say anymore, but so I was thinking, basically, by my definition, upholding my idea, most of these shamans are shadow people. So, I mean, whether they're good, whether they're bad, they're different denominations of shamans at this point. Yeah. But I think we're talking about a spiritual universe, an ultraverse for sure, that doesn't want to enter into what's a typical ghost. I think they're saying that ghosts do not enter into the cryptid form because they don't have any biological manufacture, which is recreative robotics. In other words, they're using necromonger ideology to recreate a robotic creature that's just a monster. And from the dead, from anything metabolic and biological that was once alive, to make it a dead spirit to join them. in the rebirth of the spirit, they join the shaman. It used to be Egyptian folklore that you would have to fall to the shadow people in order to live again, because the shamans would take your spirit to the next level, to the next place. So after that many eons or millennia, both maybe, depending on where you are in space and time, as things are banging and tinging and changing and moving, and there's not just Earth at one time, but there's like everything under the sun and other suns and other planets. I know that Andromedan folklore, not far from where we are in Martian folklore, was heavily in Jupiter's folklore. Anything in the solar system had folklore that went into the Egyptian record before it was closed, and then for the Christian era. Anyway, but I shouldn't elaborate on that because it doesn't have an end. I'm just backgrounding way too much. So I'm saying we don't have an access really to what was, but a few things in the Egyptian record and some other co-records maybe. And I know I have that right, though, because the shadow people guided you to the next universe, and there was one. There was an ultraverse for them. I mean, just like we're limited and will die out, and what we know isn't right anymore, we're always right now. You can't always be right all the time, or you'd be living in Estes. You'd be in the perfect state. You know, we all know that. The poor Egyptians believed that. So did the Greeks, and they just fell miserable. Everybody does that. It has to come up to a CE era when you're realizing you're not in the perfect state of creation. It's just a temporal state. So things change. So in their temporal state, which they couldn't accept, it was true. It was realism. Death meant contact with the shamans who took care of you. And they had an afterlife that was known to them and recorded. Then when that fell, there had been spiritual wars before that were enormous. They're recorded in like the records of the universal death and things like that. Anyway, I'm not getting into that. The war between good and evil was on, and there were evil shamans, again, representing a war against the good shamans. So you could be taken away to the evil realms with the evil shamans. Yeah. Okay, so let me finish their answer. Yeah, shadow people are often considered a type of cryptid, or more broadly, a paranormal phenomena alongside cryptids. So it's undecided. Appearing in cryptozoology lore as mysterious dark humanoid figures seen in peripheral vision, linked to folklore, spirits, and other unexplained entities like the jinn or aliens. While cryptids typically refer to undiscovered animals, shadow people blur lines with ghosts, demons, and interdimensional beings, fitting into the broader, varied, or paranormal categories on cryptozoology wikis. So in a cosmological sense, I guess we're saying it's a difference of what appears to be physical. The shaman isn't actually a cryptid himself, but he becomes one. So as he might be a shadow person, does that represent him actually, or is he already changed? That's my question. So it goes on, it says, why they're linked to cryptozoology, unexplained phenomena like cryptids, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, shadow people or beings whose existence isn't scientifically proven, fitting the disputed or unsubstantiated criteria. Right, there's no way of substantiating anything like that. You'd have to grab onto some ideology of a folklore and prove it in folklore terms. That's what I'm always, okay, but, so, I mean, you'd have to. I don't really have too much respect for the idea that everything in the physical universe has no mind to it, has no metaphysic, and has no spirit to it. That doesn't ever seem to be true, really. That's when the worst kind of phenomena and horrors take place, because there is nothing created like that. It all has a spirit, it all has a metaphysical opportunity, and it all falls under some rule of order that's established or destroyed and established in an evil form. I mean, that's universalism to me, I guess. I've always known that I'm a universalist like that, but people like me are dangerous, I guess, to people who want to just believe in anything and that it's all the physical universe. I can't go for that. I can't go for that everything that's created out of, physical circumstances, physical and real. Something has to be at work that has a predisposition to a meaning of its own. So anyway. Okay, so cryptozoology wikis. Sites like Cryptid Wiki list them as featured articles alongside traditional cryptids, often classifying them as extra-dimensional or varied entities. Connection to other entities. Some theories link them to... I just love Wiki so much. They're a resource that never quits on the demand, in this time especially, for realizing that there's a metaphysical demand on people's existence that goes beyond just being here, because it's metaphysical, of course, thanks. Connection to other entities. Some theories link them to other cryptozoological subjects like reptilians or greys, suggesting they're part of the same larger mystery. How they differ from traditional cryptids. Nature. Traditional cryptids are usually animal-like, a large ape, a sea serpent, while shadow people are shadowy, human-shaped figures, often described as ghosts, demons, or beings from another plane. Focus. Cryptozoology often focuses on physical creatures, but shadow people delve heavily into the spiritual, psychological, and paranormal, sometimes linked to sleep paralysis or psychic attacks. I have no problems with that because there has to be a teleological connection, so from the descent of the shaman who's essentially a shadow person, a spiritual figure, an alter universe creature, an alien to us in time and space, who knows, probably looks like a person, I would guess. If I'm relying on Egyptian folklore for what a shaman looks like. And then he descends into the time and the space, which becomes the place where he forms his cryptid order, or where he performs his shaman order, or whatever, either way. So he passes through a metaphysical gateway, and he has to make contact on a mental level with wherever he's going to perform his oracles, right? So he has kind of a telepathic, or at least a telemetrical. He has a telemetrical situation. The shamans have telemetrical situations with their objectives of their oracles, of what they're going to be performing or what they have established performed. Whether it's evil, whether it's goodness, blessing or cursing, either way, I'm saying they have oracles of either of those that appear to be active. So they could have made contact to anybody or anything on its own mental level, on its own identical level to its, epistemate self-identity, to how it thinks, what it thinks, to reason, to human reason, to creative reason. It's hitting it on a telemetrical level, this creature. So, that's pretty devastating. So if you have an evil spirit, essentially, in self-knowledge of its determinism, how we were doing this the other day, how dangerous is that? It would be like receiving a shaman blessing in these days. You couldn't really put that off either. They're if they have the opportunity, they're too far in advance of what we're just sitting here observing. So I have no problem that it could actually affect. Telemetry affects every nerve and everything that's ever been made. So it could easily be that way. Yeah, that it affects the neurological conditions of creatures and people. In essence, shadow people exist at the intersection of folklore, paranormal investigation, and cryptozoology, making them a popular, albeit controversial, inclusive in discussions about unexplained entities. Fine. Let me pause right here. Okay, well, I'm still on the Ranker site from Graveyard Shift, and I found this interesting piece here. It's called All Shadow People Are Terrifying, but the Phantom Hat Man may be one of the worst of all. I'm wondering if what they mean by Hat Man is Boogeyman. I can't believe I do this to myself. Okay, people, I'm going to search this again. Is the Hat Man... I'm one of the few people, I shouldn't say this here. The recent movie from the second decade, 10 to 20, I mean, called The Boogeyman, was one of my favorite movies. I like horror movies. Is the Hat Man the Boogeyman? And I don't know anybody else who likes that but me. Yes, the Hat Man is considered a modern version or specific manifestation of the Boogeyman or Boogeyman, however you spell it. A shadowy, frightening figure from folklore that haunts people, especially during sleep, appearing as a tall, dark man in a hat, often linked to sleep paralysis and intense fear. While traditional boogeymen vary, the Hat Man is a consistent shadow person entity, sometimes seen as a demonic extraterrestrial or hallucination, but always embodying a universal fear figure. So I would guess that the boogeyman must be kind of a priest of the shamans, if my story was true. I'd explain him as a priest class in the shamans. So the shamans are very big alien, extraterrestrial, kind of non-existent folklore creatures, the way I'm defining them. So the shamans are the big leaders of their own intentions for occult, religion, faith, existence, realism, fact, fiction, everything. They run their own civilization. And then they would have priests. So I would guess that the shadow people are actually maybe the priest class. They aren't the leader shaman. There's a difference between a shaman and a shadow person. The way they're describing the boogeyman, he has a special intention that's only in priest class of attainment, whereas the actual shaman has much more power and intention to prove his existence as physical. It's not, Okay, well, anyway, so let me go back to this article. And then I have another article later on from Ranker. It's from Lifestyle in Ranker that says that it's called People Who Have Encountered Cryptids Describe What They Saw. So there's several stories on that, short stories on that. I'll do that another day under a separate cover. Let me get back to this article. So this is just a bunch of short vignettes on the Hat Man, the boogeyman. As God is my witness, I wasn't ever sure recently. I am that lazy. I haven't searched if the boogeyman and the Hat Man were the same guy because I've been trying to figure out if the Slender Man and the Invisible Man, if it's all one big shadow person, priesthood, the priests of it can just, be whatever they want. Boogeyman, Invisible Man, Slender Man, or Hat Man, or if it's just supposed to be one person. I think they're differentiated, and I've been confused. So I didn't want to really cross that bridge too much of my own authority. I try and do things. I try and skate over the edge of the cracked ice around the corners. I thought, I'll just wait until I'm motivated, and I was, so I took up all your time. Give me 1 second, and I'll start this article. I have to... Hopefully my phone won't go off on me. If it does, I'm sorry. All right. So, dark apparitions that reveal themselves while you're sleeping are scary enough. But of all the shadow people that visit you at night, the Hat Man may be the most creepy. It's been discovered that there are different classes of shadow people, and this terrifying man with the hat is among them. He's been spotted all over the world, and according to people who've shared their stories, the Hat Man has apparently been around for a while. What are shadow people? It's certain these dark apparitions aren't human, but with all kinds of theories about their existence, from time travelers to aliens, no one really knows what they are or where they came from. The Hat Man is believed to be one of them, and although he's extremely mysterious, many witnesses claim he's over 6 feet tall and always wears a hat. According to creepy stories about the Phantom Hat Man, he appears during times of emotional turmoil or distress and will often observe you as you sleep. Who's the Phantom Hat Man? Humanity may never know, but if he ever pays you a visit, consider yourself special. So I don't think he's AKA Boogeyman necessarily, because not all boogeymen wear hats. Some of them do. That's kind of interesting. The Hat Man is said to wear a fedora or top hat, a trench coat, and have glowing red eyes. Yeah, not all boogeymen have glowing red eyes. These are franchises of the shadow people who are all serving the main head called shamans. According to everyone who's seen him, the Hat Man appears as a completely dark figure like other shadow people. The obvious difference is that Hat Man wears a hat, which has appeared as a top hat in some sightings and a fedora in others. While many people are unable to make out what he is wearing, some report seeing old-fashioned clothing, a long trench coat or a cape, and he always appears at least 6 feet tall. The Hat Man's face is also usually indistinguishable, but many who he has visited have claimed he has glowing red eyes, unlike other shadow people. There have also been reports that Hat Man carries a gold watch attached by a chain to his belt and will occasionally look at it. Next section. Although some people claim the Hat Man has attacked them, he is usually content just to watch. As I understand it, Hat Man accounts are related to indirect circumstances. He observes a victim who becomes his victim or who might become his victim, chooses a victim by observation, and then redirects the course of something to have to happen, which attacks the person and makes them the victim. He doesn't ever really issue direct contact. People who claim the Hat Man has attacked them tell stories about being jumped on or choked and have experienced burning in their chest or tingling on their scalp. Oh, yes. They show that in the movies. Then he also attacks them. But I know I'm right about the other accountability. He does not always attack them. Shadow people are said to often do this. The Hat Man is also happy just watching. He tends to stay longer than most shadow people as well and has been spotted watching people in the mirror, bending over them while they sleep, or just hanging out in the corner with a creepy smile on his face. Perhaps not attacking a person and simply observing from afar is much more terrifying, especially since many people insist Hat Man has a solid form unlike other shadow people. And while shadow people tend just to disappear when it's time for them to leave, the Hat Man has been seen floating above the ground or walking away. Yeah, you hear this characteristic often. He's described exactly like that repeatedly and through time stories, yeah. Hat Man often appears during times of trauma, aggression, or other negative emotional disturbances. In many cases, the Hat Man seems to be hanging around areas where there are negative emotions taking place, such as households that have experienced domestic abuse, fighting, or depressed family members. Some people believe the Hat Man is a demon sent to bring those who are about to die to hell. Others think he is demonic. Heidi Hollis may be able to back that up with the story a German soldier told her about witnessing Hat Man asking who he was and being told Scratch, an old nickname for the devil. Hollis also recounted the story of a suicidal man who woke to find himself in the hospital and the Hat Man close by. According to the story, the Hat Man quickly disappeared after the man woke up, but not before saying, "I almost had you." Next section. Some people believe the Hat Man emits very powerful negative energy and feeds off the fear he causes. People can usually feel when they're being watched, and a gaze from the Hat Man is no exception. Many have also noted a very dark energy emitted from him and said they immediately knew he was extremely evil and very likely wanted to kill them. Some get the feeling the Hat Man is enjoying their fear and actually feeding off of it. It's impossible, however, that since people who witnessed Hat Man are usually already in a fearful, angry, or other emotionally charged state, thanks to whatever negative thanks to whatever negative thing is going on in their life, they associate Hat Man with their negative feelings. Because he appears in so many different situations and occasionally to several people in the same family, there isn't really a clear explanation if he's truly evil and why he appears to so many people. He has been seen all over the world, making the Hat Man a global phenomenon. In 2001, the subject of shadow people was first introduced to mainstream media via Coast to Coast AM. After the broadcast, many people sent in drawings of what they had seen and shared stories about their own experiences with shadow people. Author and strange encounter enthusiast Heidi Hollis noted in 2008 that there was a commonly seen shadow person she named Hatman, and people all over the world claimed to have been visited by him as well. No one expected so many people to have experiences with Hatman or shadow people, but the similarity of people's stories has given the creepy dark man a lot of popularity and more credibility for a lot of people. You can find stories all over the internet from those who have encountered him, and one person started a website specifically to collect tales about Hatman sightings. I think they just recently gave him, that was very appropriate that should have happened at some point, Hatman distinction, because he's actually appeared in global folklore like any of these altered reality stories, but still realistic stories. I'm not saying they're all psychotic. I don't by any means. I don't. I mean, it is a psychotic dimension. It happens under tremendous psychotic trauma to anybody. It's just phenomena of that situation. Just like when you're having a very glorified spiritual experience, you have a connection to a higher spiritual experience. Well, if you're having something that's psychotic and traumatic going on, you would still have an experience of a kind, maybe. I mean, why would it only be in the direction of positivism instead of negativism? There's energy of all kinds. You have to learn how to deal with everything. And being here, just keep going. I think that's fair. So anyway, but he's been cited, the guy with the hat, the boogeyman, the guy who's not there, who's my other favorite, the guy who's too thin and too tall, the what do you call that, the anorexic guy. Yeah, I'm stupid to say things like that. Anyway, the slender man. I'm sorry I said that. Anyway, I think the slender man is the cinch of all of these other shadow people. He's become a real upsetting figure to my research, but I dropped him recently because I couldn't stand the affectation that I get. He's on top of anybody who wants to read about him. He makes direct contact. I didn't appreciate it. I washed my hands of him. So hopefully I won't have to read about him. Anyway, but they recently gave him a name, and I'm sorry, I have to hold my ground. He's been appearing for longer. They usually classify him as Boogeyman for longer than they claim to have given him a name, but it's a nice name. I don't think he had that name before. So, like shadow people, the Hatman often appears when people are experiencing sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is a sleep disorder that scientists believe may be caused by a disturbed REM sleep cycle. People who experience this physically harmless but psychologically terrifying experience are fully awake but unable to move. It's usually preceded by apnea. Many instances of apnea are your warning before that becomes a condition. So they may also have hypnagogic hallucinations as they are trapped between being asleep and being awake. I know everybody's had that phenomena where they are just dying to wake up and they can't because they have to see the end of the story of the dream that they're in, and they can't wake up, and might see things like shadow people or the Hatman. These hallucinations can obviously be quite scary and even more terrifying when the person experiencing them is unable to move. Scientists have no explanation for why so many people see the same creepy apparitions, though. Many people experience shadow people and the Hatman when they are awake as well, so the idea of sleep paralysis doesn't completely account for this phenomenon. There is living somnambulism. It's a phenomena of paranormal encounters. That might be it. Hatman often appears in the bedroom, and many first saw him when they were children. Although the Hatman can seemingly appear at any time of day in any location, many encounters people recount have taken place in bedrooms, with a large amount of sightings occurring in basements. Why this is the case isn't entirely clear, but since many basements are dark and scary to begin with, it makes sense. Considering many encounters with the Hatman take place when a person visited is about to go to sleep, has just woken up, or is already asleep, the Hatman appearing in a bedroom makes sense too. Lots of witnesses have met the Hat Man when they were children and kept the stories to themselves for many years, either because they didn't want to be thought of as crazy or they didn't rationally believe the story themselves. One person saw Hat Man only while dating a boyfriend who turned out to be a very violent person. This is an account of that story. After I am able to... I had a pop-up right in my face when I was positioning the page. I'm sorry, I have to go back to that. My now ex-boyfriend always talked about these shadow people. He saw the top hat man and the man in the fedora. He always said the top hat man came to warn him of awful things that were going to happen. I, of course, thought he was a psycho and dismissed it. 2 months later, I started to see the man in the hat next to our bed. He would lean over me. Anyways, my boyfriend ended up violently assaulting several girls. I read somewhere that he may show up if you are in the presence of an evil person or dangerous environment. I also saw a different shadow man in the middle of the road in the car at night with him. I explained his appearance to my boyfriends. He explained immediately that this man came when dusk occurred. Ironically, I went to a doctor's visit the next day and was informed I had a miscarriage the last night. Since we broke up, I haven't seen shadow people. Next section. At least one person saw the Hat Man with a young girl who spoke an unknown language. I saw him, and this is the account. I saw him at 18 years old in my room after a particularly traumatic experience. I woke up at an incredibly late hour, probably 2 or 3. I didn't check, but something was off. I was speaking in a language I've never heard. I was speaking to what I can only describe as a young girl, or something with the body of a young girl, perhaps 14, in a dress. I couldn't make out her features, but I could make out her eyes and her mouth, which could only be described as sharp-looking, like a human piranha or something. She was whispering something in my ear, and I was replying in this strange language. But it wasn't just a shadow girl. My bed was surrounded by tall, dark figures, which I could not make out the features of, perhaps 4 of them not counting the girl. They sat motionless and watched me, but the most striking figure was a tall man in a wide-brimmed hat standing in the corner of my room. I could feel as if he was amused, no, more amused than the others. Each time the girl whispered in my ear, I would let out a reply which I didn't understand, and the man in the hat would be delighted. You'd think that one would be scared of this sort of encounter, but it felt familiar. I felt rather warm, as if I was surrounded by old friends or family. I forgot to add that I was researching this encounter and came across a startling similar account. The person had an almost identical experience, minus talking in another language, or at all for that matter, and that the little girl was yelling into her ear as opposed to whispering as she was for me. Very strange. She said very strange. I didn't say that. I don't think that's so strange for the accountability. I mean, it is in itself, but I would not say that. Next section. No one knows who the Hat Man really is, but he may be an interdimensional being or astral projection like shadow people. There are many theories regarding what shadow people actually are and why humans see them, and the Hat Man may have a similar explanation. Perhaps he is an interdimensional being visiting humanity from another dimension and only partially visible because he's on a different vibration than we are. That seems to be my explanation. He could also be an astral projection, the shadow of a person who's currently traveling out of their human body. A demon is certainly a possibility based on all the negative feelings people feel around him. Other theories about the existence of the Hat Man include aliens, time travelers, and ghosts, as well as just the wild imagination of the witnesses. Currently, there's no scientific method to test any of these ideas, so for now, the Hat Man remains a very creepy mystery. Part of the Creepypasta Club. Oh my gosh, that's the end of the article. Well, then I guess I can post this. Thank you all, friends, for listening. The next article, I think, that I'll be taking up will be called, as I said, People Who Have Encountered Cryptids Describe What They Saw. That's from Ranker and Now This Time Lifestyle. Next time, sorry. The ones that I just read were the end of what I had from Ranker and Graveyard Shift. Until the next time, have a very nice day, night, week, whatever happens to trespass.